Welcome back, MTG Joe here. Today we're doing a kind of off-cycle meta update. We have the Neon Dynasty Championship happening this weekend. That's split format, historic, and alchemy. So I thought I'd go over what the deck selections were, any kind of new decks that the pros identified, something that maybe will break the format, or just kind of new cards, kind of new strategy, stuff like that. There's a separate video for Alchemy if you want to check that out. And those of you who are new to the channel, what we do on this channel is once a week, we go through what the top performing meta decks are on Arena for Standard, Historic, and Alchemy. You can check those out in the video playlist. We look at Untapped GG, which is a companion tool that tracks win rate records for Arena. So we can look at, say, 50, 100,000 game sample sizes. We look at tournament results from MTG Melee, and we kind of form a consensus in terms of what is kind of the trending analysis in terms of the best performing decks to kind of get you into Mythic. We also do a bunch of gameplay on the channel. So if you want to kind of see the decks in action, you can always kind of tune in from here. So historic metagame Neon Dynasty Championship. If you like blue-based decks, this is the format for you. Is it Phoenix? 25% of the field. Then we got Azorius Control, 9%. Jeskai Control, 6%. Lotus Field, 6%. Yorion, which is just, hey, we wanted to build blue-white control, but hey, we can put in 20 more removal spells and counter spells. So kind of played there. So it's you got your Phoenix decks, you got your Teferi control decks, and then you have your Auras decks, blue-white, and then we see some people bringing Orzhov Auras. And then you got your food decks, Golgari Food being the most represented. It seems the direction that most of the decks have gone, away from the traditional Jund. And we see some copies of Arcanist. Be interesting to see if they're on Lurrus or no Lurrus versions. And then we got other, could be anything. So there's a lot of lists here. We'll go through some, kind of skim through. I'll post all the deck lists. You can find them here along with Alchemy. You can import any of these deck lists and try them out. But when push comes to shove, we're seeing a lot of blue-based control. So kind of just going to skim over some of these, like with the decks. These deck, like looking at really quick, this Jeskai control deck looks pretty stock to what we're seeing. It's a Mizzix Mastery, Torrential Gearhulk deck. That's looking to chain Magma Opus. So this version's heavier on the graveyard effects. You can as early as turn 3 cast Magma Opus thanks to Mizzix Mastery. Interesting splits though, you're only on 2 Teferis, 1 Narset main. And in terms of your mana base, 1 Hall of the Storm Giants. And this one has no Shark Typhoons in the main board. Also, no Shark Typhoons in the sideboard. They're opting to go with Dream Trawler, which is somewhat new in terms of you don't see Dream Trawler too much. It's usually one of the uncounterable spells, but I guess this is a concession to some aggro. Also, just something that I want to check with some of these lists. So this is on Anger of the Gods, Wrath of God, only 2 sweepers main. So kind of playing into the notion that this format's likely going to be more control-based. Divine Purge is a card that we'd see some numbers of as well. That could be in the blue-white decks. Is it Phoenix? Really what you look at is their split of threats and how graveyard focused they are. So a lot of the decks recently have been moving into 2 Stormwing entity and then Crackling Drakes in the main. So it does allow you to have these kind of explosive graveyard focused deck attacks or kind of setup turns. Getting 2-3 Phoenix out of the graveyard as early as turn 3 potentially. But it's not all in on the graveyard, and it lets you play against like Rest in Peace. We see decks are playing mainboard Soul Guide Lantern as kind of hate cards. Your Crackling Drake doesn't care. Crackling Drake just smashes. Same with Stormwing Entity, could scale up as early as turn 3 can come down. We're also seeing like Den of the Bugbear being played. A card that's coming in a lot of these sideboards is Sylvium, standalone threat that can accrue card advantage. Blue-white control, notably a lot of these decks, even in like Modern, we're seeing a lot of the blue-white decks starting to use some copies of Wandering Emperor. Flash threat could come down at end of turn, start pressuring your opponent, can kill stuff. A lot of flexibility there. You're also seeing some of the decks play Farewell, just catch-all removal. Blue-white versions are still on the Shark Typhoons. Also 4 of March of the Otherworldly, so a lot of new cards finding their way in. Like I mentioned, like a lot of the decks will play Nezahal as kind of a split. We're also seeing a 2 of Baneslayer, 1 Lyra. kind of package in the sideboard versus the aggro decks, just stonewall the opponent. Rakdos mid-range. This is experimental synthesizer deck. So kind of cool. We've seen some variations of this in the Alchemy, quite a few decks. But this version here, oh, sorry, not experiment. This is not an Omni-Cult Anvil deck. So it's like Valdare and Epicure. Yeah, they're not playing they're just kind of nickel and diming. They're using a synthesizer as card advantage in the deck that can late game push. You can buy it back with Luris, so it's card draw and Luris. So kind of an interesting take there on how to approach it. Blazing Rootwaller, you can discard it to itself to get free value. So an interesting take on kind of the Rakdos Luris shell. Seeing copies of Calling Ritual in the sideboard. Do they have green mana? This deck's weird. Oh, Forsaken Crossroads, only way to cast it. Alright, well, blow up all your stuff as well, but interesting. Esper Tainted Pack. So this is using Tainted Pack and Jace to kind of combo kill your opponent. It's generally built as a control deck. 5-color Niv, Territorial Kavu, Niv's in there, Maelstrom Pulse, Clarions as their sweeper. So some variations of these decks always kind of pop up. It's a popular, it's a popular deck in the sense players really gravitate towards this, but you lose out on some of the really good playable cards like not nerfed Omnath or Boros Planeswalker, that's slipping my mind, 4 mana that you can search a creature for its ultimate. It's going to bother me. See our first Auras deck, and they're actually playing 4 of Light Paws, which is a new card that lets you tutor for specific auras when you target it, or when you cast them. Esper Sentinel as well for card advantage. So creature heavier version. We've seen these lists go as low as like 8 to 10 creatures at times, but then you kind of lose to yourself if you just can't find one and get a hands full of enchantments. We're seeing Karametra's Blessing as protection spells, Glaring Aegis as a way to tap down blockers, Arcane Flight as a way to get evasion, Ruin for life gain, Conviction as a way to kind of rebuy the auras so you can keep bouncing it back and forth to your hand to get card draw off it, which is kind of cool. What else are we seeing? Lotus Field. So Strict Proctor makes it so that Lotus Field doesn't force the sack. You're seeing Divine Purges in this version. Discontinuity to cut opponent's turn, and you win traditionally through your Shark Typhoon, Teferi Alt, or some copies of Hall of the Storm Giant. Let's be honest, most of the time you're winning through your opponent conceding. Kind of a cool thing. No red mana, but with the Lotus Field you can make red mana for Chandra, which is a great mirror breaker for these blue-white mirrors. Just kind of put the pressure on your opponent. We're seeing some of the versions of these control decks playing Wedding Announcement for the control mirror, so you're seeing some variations. Interestingly, like this version, no Narsets, but opting to instead play Teferi Slows the Sunset as a way to kind of tap-untap Lotus Field for extra mana, so slight variations here and there. We see the first of the Omni-Cult Anvil deck, and I played this one yesterday or the day before on stream, and it's really fun. Omni-Cult Anvil, a bunch of cheap blood token, cat oven combo. The tokens, when you sack the food, also generates token. Meat hook drains, so kind of a cool mix there. It's a Luris shell kind of paired with it. So we're seeing some versions of that. 5-color Niv. And like I said, you can go through these, kind of look. We're just going to kind of skim to see what the meta is like. So this is the Luris-less version of Rakdos Arcanist. So without Luris, you get Seasoned Pyromancer, which is a fantastic card to refill your hand. I get to play Graveyard Trespasser, Chandra, and Sorin. Sorin's like really good in this deck because it gives you card advantage, but also it gives you lifelink. This deck, you do a lot of damage to yourself. So the lifelink goes a long way. Also notably with this, you're playing 8 discard spells, which are great the first couple turns of the game, but late game suck. So being able to discard them to Seasoned Pyromancer for tokens is also great value. This could be a good pick into a field of a lot of control decks. And it's not as all in on the graveyard. Like Seasoned Pyromancer could deal without the graveyard. You have your Planeswalkers. Probably would like, you got the Legion Warboss. So if there is that was looking for the not graveyard threat. So that's a good one to include in the sideboard. You got some Phoenix decks. Kind of a mix of creatures in these. So this is the traditional Rakdos Arcanist with Luris. So you kind of low to the ground. Interesting. Not super like self-mill, but got some copies of Magmatic Channeler in there as well. No Young Pyromancer. Interestingly, you have Rahilda in this version, so another threat. So a lot of this deck with the Arcanist is like turn 1, discard your removal or your wave interaction. Turn 2, here's my threat that if you don't answer it, we'll run away with the game. Arcanist, Rahilda, stuff like that. So kind of cool there. So we see Sam Black on Orzhov Auras. So Light Pause. So this one's only on 12 creatures. We saw 17 in the other Auras build, the blue-white. So what you get in black, an interesting Mox Amber. All the creatures are legendary, so it's kind of free ramp. You get the discard, so you could protect yourself from removal. The hell, Skyblades Blooms. Enchant creature gets +1/1 and flying. That's kind of cool. Kind of rebuy it from the graveyard. You get Kai's Ghost form, which is really the big payoff in this. Also, not to be like understated, just having this black line to return a creature from your graveyard's big game. You usually want something like that. We are seeing some red mana. What's the red mana for? Cartouche of Zeal. Target creature can't block this turn, so kind of a way to play around. Also, Light Pause can tutor it, so you can get rid of blockers, which is kind of cool. More Rakdos Arcanist. So we're seeing that most of the Rakdos Arcanists are not Luris-based versions, which is interesting. More Orzhov Auras, some Phoenix, Control, Phoenix, Auras. Somebody brought Merfolk. Somebody brought Merfolk. Corey Burkhart, you mad lad. Seeing if there's any tech in here. So kind of stock Faceless Agent actually is pretty cool in the deck for free value. Where's Frilled Mystic coming in? Frilled Mystic. 2 of Frilled Mystic for that flash counter. Collected Company deck. So kind of cool there. Golgari Food's a deck I just want to kind of mention. So Witch's Oven, kind of just Death by 1,000 Cauldron Familiar triggers. Meat Hook to drain, kind of just grind them out that way there. Cursebound Witch, one thing to note, if you get day-night cards, they don't flip right now if you draft them. There's a bug with that. So kind of an interesting there. Graph Reaver is a card that's seeing some play just to deal with the Planeswalkers. 2 mana, you can exploit it to itself, and it can kill like Teferi or something. Pretty good rate. Worst case, it's a 2 mana 3/3. More control, we're seeing the Wandering Emperor. That's really what you want to see. Some of our Gruul Aggro. This deck is really kind of fallen off. As someone who's loved Gruul Aggro, it saddens me that Embercleave Aggro is not a deck anymore. Phoenix, Mardu Reanimator, okay. Burial Rites, kind of self-mill. You have your Priest to reanimate. Coma, Elish Norn, Sheoldred, Sarah's Emissary as your kind of big threats. Ashiok for graveyard help. Interesting they're not playing the new Jin, the counter one. They're playing the old one, but I would imagine this deck probably has a pretty terrible matchup into control, and it is pretty all in on your graveyard. There doesn't seem to be a backup non-graveyard. So this deck, something like this is really good in best of 1 because you can just get your opponent, but in best of 3, you're kind of susceptible to the graveyard hate. Cuneo on Dimir, Tainted Pact. Some more Arcanist, Golgari Food, Jim Davis on Blue-White Auras, Phoenix, just kind of taking Azorius Affinity. Okay. You have my interest. So Nettlecyst gets really big. You have your Thought Monitors to draw you cards for cheap, as little as 1 mana. Karn Scion of Urza. Just checking if there's any new cards. Moonsnare Prototype is a cheap way to kind of get ahead. No Emery in this version, no Sigh's in the sideboard, no Tutor Karn, but interesting deck. More Auras, more Phoenix, Rakdos Aggro, Reinforced Ronin, Rabid Battery, Bomat Courier, okay. Unlicensed Disintegration, Ani Call. So different take. This is more creature-based aggro. You got your Blinkmoth Nexus in there. So kind of a cool take on the aggro deck. Phoenix, Rakdos, Arcanist. A lot of control. So I think whoever kind of brought a way to beat Phoenix in control will be in a pretty good spot. A couple different takes on Gruul aggro. Creativity, so kind of combo out into Sarah's Emissary. Very good against a creature heavy meta, not very good against a, like, at least game 1. Game 2 you can get like Niv out or some other cards, Nezahal, which do better, but on its own, the Sarah's Emissary is not the greatest of threats. Do they have any, and no creature lines in this version? Just dies to a sweeper. Let me do a quick scan. Control Simic Paradox Engine. So combo here. Reality Chip is a new card. Lets you play off the top to kind of get some value out of that, which is kind of cool. Lotus Field, Phoenix. So compared to Alchemy, there's a lot more diversity in Alchemy. Kind of the top decks here. So I just don't want to show you like, okay, so what is this Yorion Azorius deck really all about? Just more cards. Omen of the Sea is the thing you could blink. Portable Hole you could blank. You could technically blank Soul Guide Lantern. You could reset your Planeswalkers, but just more when you can't decide what to cut, so instead you just add more. 4 Malevolent Hermits, really good call into this control mirror. Kind of screw up your opponents, get it down on turn 2. You can only get hit by Mystical Dispute on curve. Jund Food, so kind of an old take, Cauldron Familiar deck with Corvold. Some meat hooks in there, but nothing too in it, like new in this. You got some City Stalker Connoisseurs, a Brittle Blast. How many times am I going to say Control Phoenix, Control Phoenix? Some Infinity, Vault Scourge kind of cool in here. Gets really big, gains you lifelink, helps race. With there not being that much Divine Purge that we're seeing, unless I'm mistaken. We'll take a look next time we hit Azorius control. Somebody brought Esper Greasefang. Karn in here, Greasefang, basically as early as turn 3. You reanimate Parhelion, which kind of gives you some value, which is cool. Is it aggro? So a low to the ground kind of Wizards aggro shell. Respect. This looks sweet. It's the easiest sideboard ever. I'm going to counter your stuff. I'm going to Roiling Vortex you, or I'm going to stop your graveyard. Turn creatures and play spells. Esper Auras, Mardu Greasefang. Martin Yuza brought Gruul aggro. I'm really just interested to see how these play out, especially going 1 Collected Company. Usually you want more Collected Company into the control decks because it lets you play it on their end step to get around sweepers. So really interested to see how these ultimately play out. So you do have the 3 Collected Company in the sideboard, 1 more at Braid. So if Gruul can make a comeback, I am a happy camper. Lotus Field, more Greasefang, Jund Food, Esper Pact. Sorry, I'm going a little quick, but I just want to see if there's any kind of new innovative decks. Various takes on like the Greasefang kind of archetypes. It's just not really interesting. Okay, so we got an Enchantress deck, Kowalski, Jukai Naturalist slotting in here, Hallowed Haunting 4 of, so does have some 9 lives locked, but can close the game fairly quickly with the Hallowed Hauntings, which is kind of cool. With them playing Farewell, though, this seems a little bad into the decks that are running Farewell. If they're not running Farewell, they should be okay, because you just outdraw them in terms of cards. So I'm going to kind of wrap it up like this. You kind of get a feel for the meta. You got a Heliod combo deck. You can take a look at these individual decks, see if any stand out, but like really what we were emphasizing is like blue-based Teferi, Phoenix, and kind of the main deck. So I'd be really interested to see if post this tournament we see some sort of shake-up, something to bring down these like combo deck. Wouldn't mind seeing something in the Sacrifice deck go, maybe a nerf. If that case, this Historic is a digital format, so maybe Teferi costs 6 mana That seems to be their like nerf. Everything costs 1 more mana. Or like Cat Oven could only do at sorcery speed to get around to enable creature decks a little bit more. It's just something like that to see if it shakes up, because this meta has been very similar to past metas from 6 months to a year ago, so we really want to see how things evolve. But that's it. I'll come back with the normal installments. We'll probably do some analysis at the end of the weekend to see what took place in terms of the actual winning decks. But this is kind of a sneak peek ahead of time on what the performance or what the meta kind of looks like. Let me know in the comments what you think, and we will catch you next time.